550 applications, but only one job offer. Let's try to reverse engineer what's going wrong here. Hi everybody, it's Brian from A Life After Layoff, and today I want to troubleshoot, reverse engineer a job search that seemed to be particularly difficult. If you're struggling with your own job search, I recommend you try to do something similar to try to pinpoint where exactly it is that you need to improve. But before we jump into that, if you're interested in learning how to take control and start to act like the CEO of your career, make sure you sign up for my free weekly newsletter. In it, I share concise, actionable tips each and every week on how to approach your career with more authority and conviction, including how to troubleshoot a particularly difficult job search just like this one. So keep in mind, it's absolutely free. Hope to see you over there. So as a career coach, one of the things that I typically do when somebody's experiencing a particularly difficult job search is we walk through and try to pinpoint or troubleshoot where their job search is going wrong. And there's often different pain points along the way. And usually when we break down the numbers, it becomes pretty obvious where they could improve upon. And in this video, I'm going to break down somebody's actual job search results, and we'll try to pinpoint where exactly they might be falling short, maybe a few things that they can do to unstick themselves, and then hopefully get a better result at the end. Because trying the same unsuccessful things over and over again is just going to produce the same poor results. So it is highly recommended that you look at the numbers from a pragmatic perspective, and just like we would do in industry, most everybody is graded on metrics and those types of things. This is a really good habit to get into, and kudos to the person who's actually tracked this data, because it actually makes it a lot easier for us to look from a 30,000 foot level at where the pain points might be. So I would encourage you to start tracking this data if you're not already doing it already, because if you do get to the point where you need help trying to troubleshoot or diagnose, having this information is very beneficial. So in this job search, this person is looking for a product manager job, and they've got data points along the way. So we're going to start at the top level, and then we'll drill all the way down to the offer. So looking at the top level, we've got 549 applications, which is probably honestly about average for a job seeker who's in an active job search. You're going to be applying to a lot of jobs. And they've got 107 interviews, 83 rejections, and 359 no answers. The no answer component is, it's disappointing to see that there's that many. Now, we don't know how many of these jobs are age. I'm assuming, but probably a majority of these jobs he's applied to a while ago and has never heard back. It's super frustrating from a job seeker's perspective when you're just not getting any answer at all. And usually what that means is that the companies that they're applying to do not have sophisticated or they don't have KPIs at that level. Every company that I've worked for, the recruiter has to get back to the candidate, no matter if you're a fit or not a fit, within a certain period of time. Otherwise, your metrics get dinged, and we're all graded on certain KPIs, and the number of days that an applicant comes into the process versus when we have to disposition them. So usually it's been, in some companies it's been a week, some companies it's been as short as 3 days, and that one would always be challenging, because if you get an application that would come in on a Friday, and you would have to log in first thing on Monday morning to disposition those candidates out. And if you had a holiday weekend, we used to complain about it. It's like over a holiday weekend, you get dinged because you wouldn't even check the applications until Tuesday morning. So they'd say, well, first thing Tuesday morning, you need to go in and clear out your applications to try to not get any dings against you. So that was always a big thing. We just got into the habit. As soon as we would log in, you were automatically trained to just go in and clear out the ATS system. So we'd go through each candidate, we would disposition them. Either we would move them into a maybe bucket, we would move them into the no bucket, or we'd move into, yes, I'd like to set up a time to screen them. So that number being 359, that's more than half. It's really just a disappointing number, and it's just indicative of how few companies really take into account candidate experience. Because if you've taken the time to apply for a job, the very minimum, these companies should be following it up with a reasonably quick disposition. If they're just like collecting applications and they're interviewing people, but they know that they're not going to interview you, send a damn rejection letter and be done with it and let the person move on. I just don't understand why they don't do that. On top of that, they got 83 rejection emails, so at least those companies are following through. But it looks like they've got 107 interviews as a result of their inbound applications. So that's actually a pretty good ratio. That's around, let's just say, It's right around almost exactly 20%. That's about the target. We want to see about a 20% application to interview or application to interview ratio. So I would feel relatively pleased with that. What that's showing me is that their resume is relatively effective. It's catching the eye of the recruiter, and it means that they're getting into at least the preliminary screen. Typically at that level, the application level, the recruiter is doing what they call a resume screen. So they're looking for the base level requirements, and they're scanning your resume really quickly, and that's what's either moving into the yes or the no pile. It's based on, do you have the right stuff at the highest level? So this person's resume is clearly showing that they have a decent fit. So I would be pretty pleased with the 20%. That would not be of high concern to me. Of course, we want to see that percentage as high as we possibly can. So we'd still want to look at the resume and say, is there something that we can do to get that ratio even higher? Can we get the percentages up to 30% or even 40%? But depending on how competitive the market is, that may or may not be realistic. And product manager, I'm assuming the product manager is for maybe in a software as a service role. So in that case, if it is indeed in tech, it's a pretty competitive space. There are a lot of product managers that unfortunately, at the time I recorded this, ended up getting laid off. So that's actually still a pretty good, all things considered, that's actually a pretty good ratio. So from there, we have a 74 no's. So basically, let's just say 75% no's, and then we have a 25% inclined. So the second interview, that moves on to the hiring manager. Again, that's not a bad ratio. I think that's probably about right. Some of those, the candidate will probably have rejected themselves. In other words, they decided that wasn't a good fit for them. It might be a salary issue. Or they just didn't clearly demonstrate that they were the best possible fit after the recruiter screened them. So that's about right. So I'm not super concerned at this level here. Then once we get into the third round interview, you've got 26 that are moving on to the fourth. So that's at the hiring manager interview level, at the second interview. So this person actually has a really high percentage of interviews that move into the panel. So what that's telling me is that this person is doing a really effective job at the hiring manager interview level. They're showing the hiring manager that they're a good fit on paper. So clearly what they're doing is working up to this point. So now they're moving into the interview process, only 7 no's to the 26 third round interviews, which is then moving into the fourth round interview. So now you're deep into the panel interviews at this point. And at the panel interview, again, the 26 and 7 is a pretty good ratio. So I'm still not showing a strong concern, but then we get to the fourth round interview, which is usually, in some cases, it may be the panel is usually the third, or it could be a technical screen. We could have a technical screen in there somewhere, or it could be a checkoff interview. And the checkoff interview is meeting with the senior leader. It's usually like the CEO, or it depends on the size of the company, but CEO or the boss's boss that is trying to ensure that they're the right fit. Where we're seeing here is 17 that have not officially been rejected, but 9 that are rejected. So it's showing a higher ratio of rejections at this point. And what that indicates to me is that the person is doing a good job of selling themselves through the first rounds of the interview, but once they get to the checkoff interview, the highest level strategy for the role, what the boss's vision for the role is, this person isn't doing as an effective a job of selling that they're the best possible fit for at that level. And at this round, we would hope to see that percentage go down to 10% or less, because you've hopefully gone through each round of the interview and you're aligned to the role of the position. Or it also shows to me that the interview team themselves might not be fully aligned with what the senior leader is thinking. So typically, this would indicate to me that there's a disconnect in general at that level. In other words, the hiring manager has a vision for what they want in the role, and it doesn't seem to be consistent with what the senior leader's vision for the role is, because they're making it all the way through the panel, yet they're coming down to the final checkoff and they're getting rejected. So that's kind of one possible thing that I would circle. It may or may not be the candidate's fault at this point. As I move into the breaking down the 17 that they haven't been dispositioned on yet, we've got the 6 no offers. So that's showing me again that there is a disconnect between the final interview, the checkoff interview, so the senior leader most likely. And this is again me assuming. Now each interview is going to be a little different. Some will be, the panel will be the final interview, and maybe the third interview is a technical, or maybe even the third interview is the hiring manager screen, where the second interview was a technical screen. So we don't really know for sure, but I'm just going to assume that the final, the fourth interview is the checkoff interview. But what it's showing to me is that this person is not doing a great job of linking that they're the best strategic fit for the role. They may have the technical component down, but so what this is showing me is that they're not doing a great job of showing that they're the best cultural fit for the organizations that they're interviewing for. And I want to put an asterisk here before people jump down my throat about cultural fit. I'm not talking about race, color, creed, gender, any of that kind of stuff. Cultural fit is the culture of the organization. Some cultures are very fast paced, and if you work in a place that's much more methodical, like we used to have an issue when we would work in, I was working in sheeted processes, like in like paper mill type places with huge pieces of equipment. It was very dirty. It was the tolerances were not necessarily as critical, but you had to work with big machines and be able to troubleshoot and kind of handle them. So we would never target people who worked in aerospace or like semiconductor, because it was just such a different world. They would walk into our plants and the engineers would just like look at this stuff and they would be completely in over their head. And vice versa, a person that worked at one of these plants, these paper mills, would walk into the semiconductor facility and be completely out of their league, because that's much more finite, much more detail oriented, and it's just the competency isn't the same. It's a different pace. It's a different culture in that organization. So that's where it's indicating to me that there might be a cultural mismatch with this person when they're going in. And that's where I would say it's important to understand what the culture of the organization is through careful interviewing, through careful interview questions that you might ask, and then trying to ensure that you're positioning yourself to be the best possible fit for what the organizational or the departmental culture is. So that 6 no offers there is a concern. That's something that I would circle. They're not doing a great job once they get to the very final interview to link that they're the best cultural fit for the organization, or other candidates are coming in and showing that they're a closer alignment. Then you've got the 10 in process or ghosted. Based on these ratios, based on the numbers, I would assume that you're probably still going to see a ratio. Hopefully they get another offer out of this, but I'm still thinking that there's a disconnect. So their interview skill at the deepest part, the third and fourth rounds of the interview, is where they're falling short. And the fortunate thing is they did get one offer. So when you look at it from 549 applications to one offer, you can still say it only takes one offer to say that you're successful. You've successfully completed a job search. But we would want to see that be a much higher ratio. I mean, you're at this point, what's the percentages there? That's like way less than 1% of applications that turn into offers. So even if they got a couple more offers, the ratio still is not very advantageous, especially because they're getting 107 first round interviews. I would like to see that at least closer to 10% is probably where I would say it's not nearly as much of a red flag. But because they're only getting one offer, but they're going into fourth round interviews 17 times, again, that's where it's a concern. And that's where, if I was in a coaching session with this person, we would really want to dig down on how are you behaving in the interviews? How are you assessing what it is that they're looking for? And then trying to troubleshoot and work on the interview skills. It's more of a soft competency versus the technical. I'm assuming that they're hitting it out of the park with the technical competencies. Like they're probably coming in and just crushing how they manage projects and what the technical components of project management are. But when they get into the actual behavioral components, that's where they're falling short. So all in all, again, they're successful in their job search, but I would want to see a much higher offer ratio, especially based on the fourth round interview. So as you're going through your own interview process, again, I would recommend that you try to track this information, because it becomes much easier to start to pinpoint where it is that you are falling short so that you can put a corrective action in place. In this person's case, it's interviewing skills. And the good news is that most of these are pretty solvable. If you're at the application level and you're just not getting the first round interview, the first round screens with the recruiter. And I was assuming that you're also a reasonably close fit for the jobs that you're applying to. It's almost always going to be a resume issue. So you want to address the resume to try to get those percentages to at least be, again, this is not a bad percentage. The 20% is a pretty decent target. If you're getting below 20%, I would certainly be looking at that, the resume, and seeing how can I make my resume show a little bit more cleanly that I'm a good fit so that I'm not getting resume screened. Actually created a course for that if you're struggling. I've got actually two separate courses. One is called Resume Rocketfuel, and it's my master class. It teaches you how to write a resume quickly and easily from a recruiter's perspective so that you can get the higher percentage first round interviews. And it also teaches you strategy. That's probably the most important component of that course. We talk about how to customize, how to get those ratios higher, and then use your resume strategic document. I also created Resume Rocketfuel Essentials, which strips down all the strategy components and just focuses on how to write that resume. So if you're somebody that's maybe more budget conscious, that's a perfect starting point for you. I would encourage you to check that one out so you can get those ratios higher. If you're getting those interviews, but you're not moving beyond the recruiter screen, the hiring manager screen, the panel interview, or the checkoff interview, then it's usually an interview skills. And it depends on where you fall out in the interview process. It could be a technical competency that you're not marketing yourself well enough on, or it could be a behavioral competency or that cultural fit that we spoke about earlier. And that's where the Ultimate Job Seeker Bootcamp comes in. We walk from job application all the way through each round of the interview, and I break down in a great deal of detail and strategy on how to ace each step so that you ultimately get to those offers, improve the offer ratios, and then most importantly, we can teach you how to get the most money. You're not leaving a single dime on the table. That alone is usually worth the price of admission. If you're just interested in the interview component, I actually created a course called the 48-hour interview. It's interview essentials. Again, it's designed for somebody that just needs help with the interview. It's at a lower price point. So again, if you're on a budget, that's a course that you can check out. It's kind of an intro into interviewing itself. But an even better way to go about this is to skip the recruiter altogether. And that's where Unlocking LinkedIn comes in. It teaches you how to set up a profile that's going to allow you to skip to the front of the line, have those recruiters start to contact you instead of the other way around, and hopefully be able to reduce the applications that you have to send as an outbound and get more inbound inquiries. And then of course, unlocking the hidden job market and then getting right into the interview process. So if you're interested in learning how to increase the amount of callbacks that you get and try to get those recruiters to come to you, check out Unlocking LinkedIn. That's a really good one as well. But if you're somebody that's still struggling and you want to have individualized help, I do offer some limited private one-on-one coaching. You can reach me through my website for those. Anyway, hopefully you found this enlightening. And I would encourage you to start tracking the data because it's a lot easier to troubleshoot when you can look at it at a 30,000 foot level like this, and then we can dive in and put together corrective actions. Appreciate you watching, and we'll see you in the next one.